The moment the judge's hand connected with Karoline Leavitt's face, the courtroom didn't just freeze, it fractured. In one slap, Judge Marshall Ellison crossed a line that decades of unchecked power had convinced him didn't exist. What he didn't know, as that echo cracked through the chamber, was that Karoline had already prepared for this moment. Within 4 minutes, the empire he thought protected him would begin to fall, brick by scandalous brick. And in this story, what began as an act of arrogance would end in a national reckoning. Stay with us, because what happens next will not only shock you, but expose a system that thought it could never be touched. It was a tense morning in downtown Richmond, Virginia. The courthouse stood like a monolith of tradition, cloaked in stone and shadow. Outside, reporters huddled near the stairs, whispering about what many believed would be a quiet, procedural day inside courtroom 6B. But inside that chamber, history was already shifting. Karoline Leavitt, now the youngest White House press secretary in U.S. history, walked in with that familiar air of resolve. She had testified in Congress, on live cable, even during crisis briefings. But this was different. Today, she wasn't just speaking for an administration. She was standing toe-to-toe with a legal system itching to silence her. And sitting atop that bench was Judge Marshall Ellison, 61, silver-haired, appointed 2 decades ago, known for his cold demeanor and even colder rulings against conservative figures. Whispers of partisan favoritism trailed behind him like smoke from an extinguished flame, never quite visible but impossible to ignore. And now, he was about to go too far. The federal courthouse stood tall against a sky turning blue with anticipation. Inside, the air was thick with speculation. Journalists, political strategists, and law clerks buzzed about the lawsuit targeting Horizon Journal, a conservative news outlet accused of misinformation. The real buzz, however, was the star witness, Karoline Leavitt. At just 28, Karoline had already proven herself a powerhouse of political communication. Appointed as press secretary during President Monroe's second term, she navigated national press storms with the kind of calm that rattled opponents. But this wasn't a briefing room. This was Judge Edwin Wexler's territory. And Wexler wasn't a man known for grace under pressure. Appointed in the late 90s, his rulings over the years showed a consistent lean, one that many whispered was less about justice and more about politics. Karoline entered the courtroom with precise, measured steps. Her white suit was sharp, her expression unreadable. But the room noticed. Wexler did too. From the bench, he peered down, fingers steepled, gaze fixed. "Ah, Miss Leavitt," he said, the tone thick with disdain. "The administration's favorite echo chamber." She didn't flinch. "I'm here to provide facts, Your Honor," she replied coolly. The exchange was brief, but the tone had been set. By midday, the courtroom had descended into a theater of pointed questions and political jabs. Karoline remained unshaken, until the moment arrived that would rewrite everything. The questioning turned heated. Defense attorneys pointed to inconsistencies in the judge's conduct, a clear judicial bias. Wexler, red-faced and furious, descended from the bench. The room stilled. "You dare suggest impropriety in my courtroom?" he thundered. Karoline stood. "I suggest the American people deserve a courtroom, not a campaign stage." Then a moment burned into history. Wexler raised his hand. The slap landed with a sharp crack across her cheek. Gasps filled the room. Cameras clicked. A court officer stepped forward but froze. Karoline, eyes locked on the judge, slowly touched her face. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," she said. Within minutes, the story was everywhere. A shaky iPhone video posted by a courtroom spectator went viral in under 10 minutes. Slap of shame. Justice for Karoline. Court, Wexler must resign. Hashtags trended across social platforms. Cable news networks broke from programming to air footage on loop. Even partisan outlets couldn't look away. But Karoline didn't give speeches. She gave orders. "Secure the footage. Chain of custody. No one touches it until the DOJ arrives," she told the court officer. Meanwhile, back at the White House, President Monroe was handed a tablet mid-meeting. "That man just struck my press secretary on federal record." He looked around the room. "We bury him with the truth." By 4 p.m., the DOJ had launched an official misconduct inquiry. Conservative watchdog groups unearthed patterns in Wexler's past. Cases dismissed with suspicious timing. Sealed records involving political donors. Judicial favors traded for influence. A former clerk leaked sealed documents showing Judge Wexler had silenced whistleblowers, dismissed ethics complaints, and even ordered sensitive files shredded. The slap hadn't started the fire. It had just revealed the smoke. Karoline returned to the White House that evening, not as a victim, but as a strategist. She issued a single statement: "This isn't about me. It's about the systems that protect power over people. No one is above the law." By morning, protests lined the courthouse steps. Signs read, "She stood tall. No more silent gavels. Resign Wexler." Congress called for an emergency judiciary ethics review. A bipartisan panel formed. Leaked emails from years past tied Wexler to lobbying firms and undisclosed financial backers. By week's end, Wexler had been suspended. A month later, he resigned in disgrace. 3 days after the resignation, Karoline stepped onto those same courthouse steps. Reporters pushed forward, cameras flashing. She held a pocket constitution. Flipping to the First Amendment, she read it aloud. "We don't serve robes, we serve the people." The echo reached further than she could have known. What began as one slap became the strike that collapsed a tower of arrogance. And Karoline Leavitt, calm, composed, unflinching, didn't just make headlines. She made history. If this story reminded you that power must be held accountable, no matter how high the bench, share it. Subscribe to stay informed. And always remember, truth doesn't whisper. It roars.